Hey guys, in this video I want to go over the tools I use the most often in Maya or other 3D programs that I'll use to make assets. It's going to be a pretty dense video because there's a lot I want to cover. Chances are you're going to know many of these tools already, but maybe you'll discover some more and that'd be great. So my goal here is to basically spill my brains out in regards of the tools that I'm going to be using in a lot of the tutorials you'll see on this website. And so I want you to have a place to refer to if you see me using a technique that you're not aware of, or that you want to be reminded, okay, how did you use that? What was it called? So basically this is the one-stop shop for me just showing everything I'm going to be using. That way you'll know in advance, okay, I see he's doing this tool or this technique, and you'll have a place to refer to it basically. So there's a lot to cover. So first things first, I'm just gonna make a little asset here, and like I mentioned in the other basics videos here for Maya, shift right click is what I'll use to create a basic geometry. So in this case, let's just go with a cylinder. Why not? So click and drag, we'll pull this guy out. All right. Well, what do I want to cover? First of all, this isn't necessarily a tool, but I want to share it because I use it a lot. Selecting things in your channel box over here, you could select more than one at once and then edit them all at the same time. So if I put 0, boom, now we're centered. You could also do it for when you're creating your primitives. If you want to square them off or change it in any way. Now on top of that, you could also click any of the text and then middle mouse drag and change in the 3D viewport. And this works for, as far as I know, for any of these, even turning things on and off. So that's really cool. So if you want to move it a little on any of the axes, whichever one you select, let's try all three. I don't know if this is going to work, but it does. So that's pretty handy, and I use that very, very often. So in that vein, with the middle mouse, you can also say, if you're moving things around, you could also middle mouse in your 3D viewport. Here, I'm actually gonna hide this real quick. If you middle mouse in 3D viewport, it moves things around, and it's actually gonna move whatever you had selected last. So in this case, it's moving via screen space. So wherever our camera's pointed, it's kind of clamped to that. But if we click, for instance, the x-axis, now that turned yellow. And now if we use middle mouse, it's stuck or snapped to that axis. And that's really useful. And this works for the ones in between as well. So keep that in mind. Middle mouse will let you move things like that. Super useful. Okay, in addition to that, let's just see selecting in general. You probably know going between verts and edges and faces, right? I have these hotkeyed, but you also can right click and select them individually. But say you want to select a little more, right? So let's go to edge mode, and you want this whole loop. Well, you could double click to get the loop, which is really handy. You could also, in face mode, double click to get the entire element. Or let's say you want the ring. Well, you could click one of your ladder steps here and then hold shift and double click the next one, and boom, now we have it all the way around. That's really useful, quick way of doing that. But you might be thinking, I only want like 5 or 6 of them, right? You could just drag and grab a bunch like that, or you click one, go to where you want it to end, shift, double click, and now look at that. And it works for the long ways too. And it'll find like the shortest path there. So that's really useful. And I was able to do it on an added selection too. So that's really nice. Okay, so now we know how to select a bunch of stuff. What if we wanted this to be faces or vertices instead? So I'll often convert my selection by holding Control, right click, and then you could go to vertices or to edges to faces, and there's a lot of options here. So I would look through them, right? There's growing and shrinking your selection. So if I want to grow my selection, I'll usually hold Control, right click, and then just swipe up to the side. And you can see I'm getting more and more edges. Now, if I want it to be faces, I can go down and just do to faces. And it took all the faces that were touching these edges, and now we had those. Or we go to verts. And now I have those verts. So that's really handy. And I'll often use verts to select faces a lot quicker. For instance, the top of this cylinder, maybe I'll just click the middle. And since it's touching all those faces, I'll just go to faces. And now I have the entire top. So that's pretty awesome. Okay, we've covered converting selections. Now let's talk about snapping. This is something I use constantly. So I'm going to go in vert mode, and there are a couple default snaps within Maya. So if we grab the middle here, the first I'll use probably most often is vertex snap, and this should be default in Maya by pressing V. We could see the middle change there to indicate we're in snapping mode, as well as up top here, toggling on. And so I really like how when you press it, it's on, and as soon as you let go of the button, it's back off. So it's press and hold. So I'll do that, and then I'll just move the vert where I want it, which is really handy. But again, we could combine this with middle mouse, and I could hold V and then middle mouse. And so I don't even have to bring my mouse to the center here. That's kind of the benefit of being able to use middle mouse, is that it kind of saves moving your wrist as much as you might need to in other apps. Okay, so there was vert snap, but we also have grid snap. So vert snap being V, grid snap is X. And again, up top in our snaps toolbar there, we could see that again, something's being activated. And now if we drag along, it's going to snap to our grid. And this is super useful for, say, putting things back at the origin, or if you want to move them by certain amounts that is equal to what the grid is. Very handy. Another one I don't use as often, but still very useful, is C. And C will snap to edges. So if I hold C, again, we notice it light up, so that's the one that is, and drag. Let's see if I get it working. It's kind of finicky, this one. Well, it's keeping it on this edge. A lot of times you can, there we go. It's a little finicky. You have to like hold C and then click directly on the edge. But then you notice it moves along that edge. Right? That's really cool. So if you want to have things aligned to an edge, that's great. Just undo that there. Okay. Now, there's one more here, and that's like an angle snap. So when rotating, if you want this to snap to certain angles, you could use J. And J, it's not having anything pop up there. I'll show you where it is. But now we're rotating in 15-degree increments, which we could see on the side. And this is really handy too if you want to rotate something and know exactly how much it is and don't necessarily want to type something in. Now, if we double click on the left here, it's going to open the options for that tool. And if we hold J, we'll see it toggle on step snap. So you can actually manually put it on and then change that number, and it'll respect it when you're holding J. So I find that super useful as well. Okay, going on from snapping now. I know there's a lot of manipulation focused things right now. I wanted to get those out of the way. So we know with the snapping, and we know converting and selecting. So now another thing that's really useful, let's see here. I'm gonna go ahead and hold D, which is actually, you'll see it toggle there too. It's turning on edit pivot mode. And I believe this is also default Maya hotkey. And it's going to let you move where the pivot is. So now it's out there. We might not want it out there, but we can move it out there. So that was a sub object versus when I went back to the main object, it had a different pivot point. So I moved that over there too. But you could rotate and move things from this new pivot point for both the object itself as well as sub-objects, right? So if I go into move mode, it remembered where it was. But let's say I don't want it there anymore. I miss having it in the middle, and it's painful trying to find the spot. Well, if you hold D again, if you look at the mouse cursor, it actually says reset. So if I click, boom, it puts it back to where it's regularly located. And so out here, doesn't quite do that on the object level. So here we use something called center pivot. So I have it assigned to S, and I believe it's under modify, center pivot. I use this all the time too. So I might move, for instance, I might move the pivot point over here, do something with it, and then when I'm done, center it. Now, if we combine these with our snapping tools, that's where things get really powerful. So now, really quickly, I'll hold D, V, and then middle mouse down here. So all the things we learned so far. And now, all of a sudden, I could rotate from that point. And it's super quick and fluid. And it's one of my favorite things about Maya, is being able to move the pivot point really, really quickly. It's super flexible. So, okay, what else can we do with that though? That tool's not over. Another thing you could do, if you hold D and hover over things, you see the word align. This is actually awesome. So you could align the pivot to an edge, a face, or a vert. And you might be wondering, well, what's the point of that? So if I hold D and just click this edge, you see how it changed it? Now we could slide along that edge super easily. So this is useful for if I have, let's see, I'll go back to normal now. So if this thing is rotated weirdly, I could hold D, click the edge, and now, hey, I move along that axis. Nice. That's super handy. And you could do this, of course, in here as well. So I might press D, V, snap it to that. I could rotate, right? And then I could reset it, do whatever I need to do with it. Okay, maybe I want to move it up a little. I'll line it to the edge. Move it up. That's really cool. So now we remember that that middle mouse is moving stuff too. So we're going to get into now some more editing tools. So you're going to know a bunch of these. I'm going to cover them anyway, because there might be ones that you're not as familiar with, or you didn't realize you could do certain things. Plus, again, we're covering what I'm going to be using most. So I want to make sure you guys are on the same page with what you see me using. So the first one in this regard is extrude. This is probably, you know, modeling 101. Extrude's used so much. We have it up here in the menu. Or again, I like to use shift right click and then I have it right here. So I could click extrude, and then of course we could play with the manipulator here to move it, or we can click and drag on these. This is like a nice quick menu. So this might be a little slow for you, or it might be going way faster for you. One way you could change this is this little pie right here, this little Pac-Man. If you click it, you notice it's changing, and that's actually the speed, right? So now if it's up there and I do this, whoa, we're zooming around the track, right? So I like to keep it on a lower setting so I have a little more control. But depending on your scale, you might need to edit it. Another thing I want to point out while we're here is that if I hover over this, I want you to notice in the bottom left corner down here, there's tooltips. And these are really useful for when you're using tools. They might give you hints of other options, different controls. And it's generally, if you're not sure what's going on, you might be able to find more info down there. So extrude is great. Use it constantly. I'm going to delete a couple things and show you one more that I'm really excited about that's in Maya. And it wasn't for a long time. If any of you are using 3D Max or come from a 3D Max background, there's something that people really like called shift extrude. And it's just what it sounds like, but you can hold the shift key and then drag along an axis, and it's going to extrude an edge. This makes for really quick modeling. And it's really handy, especially if you sync it up with the align tools that we were talking about, right? So that's really cool. Now, you can also use this for faces. So keep that in mind. So one example of how I might use this, right? Let's get rid of this up here. I might grab this whole thing and then just shift extrude, scale it in, right? Go back to move, extrude out. We got a pretty complex shape relatively quickly, sorry. All right, next, let's look at bevel. This is another one of those bread and butter 3D tools. Again, we can find all this stuff up here in Edit Mesh. Click it, does probably what you think. It's great, use it a lot. Beautiful, boom, moving on. Target weld. Target weld is one of those that you'll use for cleaning things up, right? Or just simplifying. So what it is, let's see if we find it up here. Target weld. Here it is in Mesh Tools. So if we click that, it's basically you click one vert, drag it to another, boom. You can simplify real quickly this way. I'll use that pretty often. Another one you'll see me use is collapse. Kind of same idea, but it's going to take the edges and then just kind of poof, bring them together. So one thing I might do, right, is I might go ahead, select the ring, and then collapse to simplify things if I'm down resing or I just have an edge that I don't need. So collapse, use it all the time. Have hotkey for it. It's beautiful. It's probably also up here. A lot of these are just going to be up in either Edit Mesh or Mesh Tools, one of these simple ones. But again, when I use it, I'll be doing Shift right click, and I can just go up, and you have more options here. There's your target weld, and you got merge to center, collapse edge. Sometimes merge to center is great. I'll use that. I'll use that here and there as well, usually for verts. Let's see here. Speaking of deleting things, have you ever grabbed an edge like this and then just hit delete and then are confused when you still see the vertices there? I know, it's awful. So a way to get around this is by clicking them, and then I believe it's Control Backspace, and then it's going to get rid of the edges and verts. This drove me nuts when I was first learning Maya, but now that I know the actual way to do it, it's pretty great. And so it would be here under Edit Mesh, delete edge vertex. Boom. All right, so we deleted a bunch of stuff. Well, let's add stuff instead. So another thing, in addition to, we talked about the Shift Extrude to add geo like we just did there. One that I'll use, probably my most used tool, to be honest, is Connect. So you grab a couple edges, and then it connects them in between, right? And so I'll use this all the time. There's a tool for it as well. You could do components. I have a hotkey just because I use it so often. I have it on Alt-C right here, but I'll use that so much, right? I might select the entire loop, grab it, and then do my edits, that kind of thing. Now, there's similar stuff to connect called Insert Edge Loop, and this is going to put in a full loop. Let's see if I find it here. Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. There's two. There's one, this one, where you click, and it adds a loop real quick and easy, right? But there's some options to be aware of here. So if we go back to our tools, and then Insert Edge Loop, we go to options. What I want to show you here is two things. One is Insert with Edge Flow. Let's turn that on. And it's going to try to hit that angle. Now this one, sometimes it doesn't know whether to go in or go out. So in this case, it's trying to round it outwards. But in a lot of cases, this can be really useful. Like if we go down here for the bevel and click, it's going to try to just follow the profile that it was kind of assuming. And so this could be really nice for rounding things out quickly instead of having to manually scale. Now you also have multiple edge loops and a couple other options like equal distance from edge, does what it sounds like. And then here we go, we could just add a bunch of edge loops. And you could specify how many, and it's like, dang, that's pretty cool, right? It's nice and quick if you need to just chop something up. So one thing that I kind of learned, and I'll point out with this one, if I go to the insert edge loop tool again, and I have it selected, and I'm using it and putting stuff down. Whoops, let me turn that off. Actually, I'll show you with this. So Control Shift right click, that's Control and Shift and right click, actually gives you options for your currently selected tool. So I don't even have to go into that menu. And this works for a lot of tools, like ones I'm about to show you as well. And it has me looking at like new options, like, oh, what if I did this? And what if I, played with that? And it's kind of really cool to be able to see the different options and change them really quickly. So the other one I wanted to show you that was similar, that I'll also use here and there, is offset edge loop. Now this is a weird one. You're going to click on an edge loop and it's going to space it evenly away from each other. So if you're a hard surface artist or learning to be, this is really handy for putting in those control loops before you subdivide, right? That's super cool. So that's offset edge loop. Okay, we're going to keep rolling. We still got a lot left. I know. We're going to truck through this. All right, let's see. So next, I want to talk about multi-cut. Multi-cut I use a lot. It does it all. So under Mesh Tools, multi-cut, or under Shift right click, it's on the left. So this does pretty much probably what you expect from the beginning, which is it lets you cut. And cut it does. That's beautiful. And then right click, it kind of finishes it off. I'm going to undo that. And I'll show you some other things it does. If you hold Control, now you can just input a loop. That's handy, right? I didn't even need to switch tools. Okay, well, what else we got? All right, if we start an edge, right, I'll go over here. Well, if we hold Shift, it snaps to the middle. That's pretty handy, right? Or it snaps to any percent if you hold it down. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. If you're trying to do precise modeling, this is really cool. You can even start putting it in and then hold Shift. And if you let go, it goes back. That's super handy. Well, okay, what else you got? Well, we could click in the middle of polys. That's great, sure, why not? But also, if you hold Control and Shift, it snaps to 90-degree angles. Now this is super cool. Just having that option available where you can just go and do 90-degree angles, it's pretty damn handy, honestly. In some cases where you want to be precise, you have the snapping as well as 90-degree angles, and it's a lot of control. Okay, but that's not all, right? Another thing you can do is slice. And now we were saying, if I select the multi-cut tool, and if we look on the bottom, it's actually giving us more info, like I was mentioning earlier, is that it could kind of give us some more tips. Well, it says here we could use backspace to delete the last point and escape to clear a line. So we can delete points with backspace and stuff. That's kind of cool. But we also have middle mouse to slice. And it's just like that. It's that quick. So if you're making destroyed assets, or you have to chop something up quickly, that's great. And if we combine it with our Shift Control right click, we have our options there. And look at that, we got edge flow. So if we want to add in the loop and get the edge flow in there, or we could use our slice settings and we could say, oh, what if I get rid of ignore back faces? And now the slice goes through the whole thing. What else we got? We got extract faces. Well, what's that do? I'll middle mouse drag. It's showing me the direction it's facing. Oh, it actually extracted it. It put it off to the side. That's really cool. You know, I don't use that a lot myself, but I also didn't know about it for very long. And then of course there's delete faces, which does what you think. And pay attention to that little orange line that we see in the middle. It's going to show you what direction is getting deleted. So that could be pretty handy. I don't know about you. And then of course you have the Y, Z, Z, X, and X, Y, which will put a plane into the scene that you can then control where you want it to be chopped. So a lot of power. And this is just the multi-cut tool. That was all the multi-cut tool. Okay, let's get back to some regular tools now for a bit. I'm going to delete a couple more. This one's one of my favorites, is the bridge tool. So does what you think. Hit bridge, and boom, it's going to connect those two. So a quick way I might fill this would be double clicking to get the perimeter, right? Double click to select the loop, unselecting the two side ones, and then using bridge. Boom, easy peasy. And then of course you have options on the side if you want to do more divisions, taper, twist, blah, blah, blah. You could play with that stuff. Bridge is great, use it a lot. Another one now, let's say we don't want to bridge this one, is fill hole. Does pretty much exactly what you're probably thinking. So let's see here. Is it in this one or is it? Sometimes they're in like little different spots. Fill. I know where I find it, but I'm trying to point it out to you guys so you could. There's make hole. Huh. Weird. Let's see. Here it is. It's just in regular mesh. I don't know why that's not in edit. Whatever. So boom, it does exactly what you thought. It filled the hole. Kind of weird not having anything in there. You could leave it that way if you want. But what I'll do a lot of times is I'll just poke face. So now we'll go in. And where's the poke? Mesh tools. Is this in mesh too? Poke face, poke face. Poke, here it is. I'm used to the full name of it, which is right here. So shift right click again, got everything we need. You can see all these different tools. We got extrude, bevel, poke, merge, multi-cut, all that stuff. But you see what it did? It automatically put in the rest of the edges for us, leading to that center point. So I'll use that if I want the triangles to be in there, if I want those edges to show up. I'll poke the face. Okay. We're getting there. We're pretty close. So let's go ahead. We talked about merge, right? So if I select these things, I want to get rid of them. I'll shift, right click, go up, merge to center, boom. Or collapse like we talked about as well. That's a great one. But if they're really close, one thing I'll do too. So if they're really close together, like sometimes if I symmetry something and I'm not like completely convinced that the symmetry is 100% proper, right? These things right here, I'll select them and then I'll just do a merge verts. So you could do merge to center, but merge to center is not going to work if, let me give you a better example. It's these and like over here, these ones too, right? We'll just bring them all close to each other. So if we did merge to center, it would average them out, right? And put them in the middle there. We don't want that. We want these to collapse and these to collapse. So what we can do is just do merge, and we could specify a threshold. So if I hit apply, it didn't do anything. But let's try bringing the threshold up. There we go, from 0.01 to 0.1, and now it collapsed all those into each other. Really useful. And you'll see me using that a lot. I have that on a hotkey as well with the, I believe it's Shift M. That way I don't even have to bring up the menu. I just select my whole mesh usually, and then boom. But you got to be careful because sometimes if your threshold's too high, you might be merging things that are close together that you didn't want to merge. So please be aware of that. Okay. Let's talk about a weird one. So this one I just learned about not that long ago. So if I put in some edges here, right, like this, I don't like where they're located. There is a tool called Edit Mesh Flow that I believe is in, oh, I just saw it. Was it mesh? Down here, Edit Edge Flow. And if let's just select one of those loops that we added, and let's just use it. Look what it did. It centered it. And now I could go through and do that to all the ones that are off center that I want to be kind of averaged with the edges around it. And this is a good time to bring up another command, which is repeat last. And this is a default Maya command that's set to G. And so now I could just go to each of these and hit G and done. I don't have to go in and go and press it again. And of course you have your options like edge flow here. So it will kind of conform to the flatness or roundness, and you could adjust that here as well. But I just love the idea that you could go and press G, and look at that, it's just averaging everything out. So now they're all the same spacing. I mean, I kind of ping-ponging back and forth because of the way I added them, but you get the idea. And that's really nice. I like having that option there. I'm not sure where repeat last is in, here it is, repeat. It's an edit, because I've always just known about the hotkey. So we'll get to these buttons in a second. Okay. Whew, that's pretty cool. Now, you ready to continue? You want to take a breather? You can pause, take some notes, go back. I understand. All right. We're gonna keep trucking. We're getting there. We're past the halfway point. It's all down it's all downhill from here. No, so other ones I want you to be aware of that you'll see me using is transform. It's just called edit and then transform. But what's good about this is it does it along the normal, right? So it's pointing the direction that the polygon is. And that's really handy. It kind of serves as, if you use Max, a push modifier, right? Or a shell. So if I select these, of course I could, try to align the vert to the center edge, and it does something similar. But what if I want to do it to a much bigger amount of polygons? So I'll select all these, and I want them all to move on their own normals. Well, if I go to Edit Mesh, Transform, and use the blue handle there, they're all going to push out against their own normals. And so that should be a really handy way to apply like a shell. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Go. Here we go. So I use this pretty often. Okay. Now here's a fun one. Let's have a fun one for a minute. We got something called tweak mode, which is if you hold tilde, see how it's like switching when I have it held down, and I drag, it's just going to let me move everything without having it selected first. This is pretty handy for small tweaks, but it gets better. You can also use this with multi-mode. So if I right click and go to multi-selection, now I can just grab polys real easily, or verts. And I believe it's moving everything in screen space, just to be aware of. So I can move edges, all that, super easy, but it gets better. So I want you guys to be aware of soft selection too. So of course you have it available if you double click and go to your tools and click it here, but nah, we're gonna do it better. If you press B and click and drag, you can adjust the radius of your soft selection, and tapping B will toggle it on and off. So what's cool here is now we could go on soft selection, pick how much we want to affect it, hold tilde, and then just kind of, it's almost like the grab brush, and like if you're using like ZBrush or a sculpting app. So it's a really nice way. And you notice I don't even have to actually be touching the model. I'm a little further away from it, and it'll give it like a little fall off. So it's a great way to just shape, especially for like organic meshes. Just hold tilde and then move it around. You can change your soft selection to whatever you want. And that's pretty awesome. Okay, this thing is just destroyed now, huh? All right, let's go over something else that I do pretty often. I'm gonna create a new one of these, just a clean slate. Let's go with the sphere. Why not? And then again, to call back to earlier, we can click the words and then middle mouse to rescale it, or like go down in our sub Ds. Right. Plus, it looks cool, right? Wow, look at that. That's futuristic. All right, so I'm gonna put that at 8. And let's talk about like detaching and stuff. So let's say I want these polys and I want them off of this mesh. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can detach it, you can extract it, or you can duplicate it. And they each are very similar. So like detach, let's see if I find it up here. Mesh tools, I think it's just in mesh. Detach. It's going to go ahead, let me center that back on there. Remember, holding D and clicking outside will reset your pivot. So it detached it. It's the same object, but now the verts are separate from the main island. So now you have 2 islands, 2 elements. That is detach. It's really useful. I use that a lot. You could also do duplicate, which, let's see here. Down here, face duplicate. And now it separated it into its own mesh, but it's a copy of those polygons. Now let's try that again. I'm going to select those and we'll do duplicate, but we'll do it with the options menu, and we can actually toggle whether or not it's separate. Now this is essentially whether this is toggled on and off. It basically becomes extract. So I'm not even going to bother really showing you extract. You could experiment with it. But if I turn that off now and duplicate, you see how it's similar to the other one. So these are commands I have hotkeyed and use very often though. Like I'll pull, if I want to start like a new mesh to this, right? I might grab all these, duplicate, just ignore this, press W, scale it, pull it up, right? Now we got a hat. Maybe I'll scale this down, and if I hold shift, it extrudes. So look at that. We already just very quickly took the geo that was already there and repurposed it just by copying it and then using shift extrude. And then of course we double click it, delete, get back to where we were. So it's a very fast way of working. All right, now we're going to get to some kind of other stuff, and then we'll get back to a couple fun things, and then we'll do something really boring. Apologies. So, okay, next we want to talk about flipping normals. So sometimes these might not be facing the right way, or they might be facing a different way than you want them to be. I believe I covered it in the first video about navigation, but I'll show you how to flip normals again. So, or at least to view double-sided or not. So let's just delete half first. And you notice the inside is dark. That's because we're seeing the back faces. So nothing's actually rendering on that side if we were to put this into like a game or something, unless it had a double-sided material. But if I go into the attribute editor, and in the surface shape, there's render stats and double-sided. So if I turn that off, we're actually not going to see the polys that are facing the other way because their normals are pointing away from us. We're technically not going to see it. If we wanted to flip that though, we could select these, go to mesh display, and hit reverse. Now we actually see those on the other side. So this is very important to know how to do, and then which way they're facing is important as well. So again, if we turn on double-sided, we'll see that the lighting is hitting it all wrong because they're actually facing the wrong way. And so it's really useful to be able to see that. Sometimes it's worth toggling it just in case, because you might have not noticed your mesh was actually doing something like that. So I'm going to reverse those back. I believe there's also, let's just test it real quick. I could access this by shift right clicking, face normals. This is while we're in face mode, and then hit reverse normals. Now there's another one I use that I believe it does what I'm about to tell you it does. You conform, and yeah, as we can see on the bottom, it makes all the normals point in a consistent direction. So this way, there won't be some pointing one way and some pointing others, but it's going to be based on like the element, the geo that's all connected. So I conform, and now it took the ones that were pointing the wrong way and kind of flipped them to point the same direction as the majority of them were. There's something else with normals that you might have run into and weren't able to solve or figured out your way out of it or whatever. But if you're importing an OBJ, or I believe this can happen with FBX too, from another program, either 3D or game engine, sometimes when you make changes to your normals, like your hard or soft edges, you won't see anything happen. If this is the case, you want to unlock your normals, and that will kind of release them to be edited again. Now, some of you might be asking, okay, well, what are hard and soft edges? That's a great question, especially since we just talked about unlocking them. So now that we've unlocked the power, let's talk about it. So right now, this is what you'd call hard edges. Everything's faceted. You know, we see every polygon as it is. However, when working in 3D, you have the option to kind of average the lighting on them. And this is done with soften edge. And so now, even though we have the same amount of polygons, it looks smoother than it really is, right? And so this is done by setting an edge to hard or soft. And so, for instance, if I select a couple of these now, hit harden edge, we're going to see a crease there. So this is done a lot of times to like fake things looking smoother than they are. And it's really widely, used technique. You'll see me doing it all the time just to make the lighting on things look proper. There is a shortcut to kind of doing these. So for instance, if I take these and like flatten them here, because some things you make might have rounded portions and there might be flatter areas, right? So one thing you can try is using this thing. If I select the whole thing and go soften harden edges in the menu, and we can set an angle or texture borders at which it's going to add a crease. So I hit apply, and now you'll see it put a crease automatically for us where the angle changed a lot. This is super useful. But what happens if I pull this one out? To somewhere around 30 degrees. It smoothed the bottom one, but the side one was still hard. So let's crank it up a little. So now you see those are all soft because of the angle they were at compared to our settings. So it's very powerful. It can save you a lot of time than manually doing it. Okay, so let's get to a couple other slightly boring things. The first one I want to talk about is all this stuff over here. This is our construction history. And Maya keeps track of everything that you do. So if you watch me, for instance, look over here, I'll connect things and it shows up, right? Maybe I'll cut stuff. And that shows up too. Now it's polysplit. This is all like stored in the memory, and it can affect it could affect a whole bunch of stuff, basically, and it could bog down or crash Maya or just kind of ruin your day, especially if you're working with like things that are like rigged. You want to be really careful of how much you allow to exist in here. So there's a way to flush it all out, which is an edit, delete by type, or delete all by type. This will obviously do it to everything in your file, and this will do it to just the selected object. Now there's one other important part of this. There's deleting the history of it and the non-deformer history of it. For a long time, I only did the history, but then I ran into a big issue with something that was rigged, and it had deformers all over it. And those are baked in kind of to this this inputs field as well of the history. And if you get rid of those, it's not going to work anymore. So you might want to be careful to not use regular history and stick to this one if you know your object is using deformers and you want to keep those. So I made a hotkey for this. I put it up here. And so every time I do a bunch of commands on it, I kind of want to reduce my chance of Maya crashing. I'll just click that and it clears it out. And then I have one that does the whole scene. That's what that is. So when you see me hitting that, I know it's very confusing to me too as well. When I first came into Maya, it's like, but what is that? Is that the history? So the good news is you could actually undo this and get it back. It causes some issues here. Don't know if Maya's going to crash right now, so I'm going to clear this out, and I'm actually going to delete this because I don't want to risk it. Oopsies. Oh man, I'm just causing trouble. All right, let's delete that. We'll delete all the history just in case. I don't want to anger the Maya gods, and bring out another one. The other one that I want to point out that's up here is this one. And this is actually freeze transformations. So if I move something around, you're going to notice these numbers change. And this is basically saying where your pivot is, or the center of it is, in comparison to the origin. So I don't know if changing this, I don't think that does it, because immediately it's becoming a different pivot. It's becoming like a manipulated one, a user pivot versus the one that's built in. So it's looking at the built-in one, and it's saying, hey, this is this far from the center, from the origin. But this stuff is kind of really important for when you're doing commands. So sometimes you might have like all this stuff all fiddly, and you don't necessarily want it to be, right? So like the numbers are all kind of broken. The good news is if you leave those in, you can zero these back out and get your object back to where it was, which in this case apparently is invisible, and that is really weird. So I'm going to ignore that and undo it. Typically that'll happen. I could actually tell you why that happened. It's because I put 0 and the scale should be 1. So let's do these first. And it straightens it back out, and then I can put the scale back to normal. But let's say we want these to be the new defaults. Well, then we could go and we could freeze our history. Where is it? Modify, freeze transformations, and it zeroes everything out. So this can be really important to do, or if you have some problems. It's the equivalent of 3D Max's reset X form, I believe. And so be aware of that. And if you want things to like remember where they are, it's not always imperative, but for some deformers or other operations that you'll perform on the mesh, try freezing the transforms. It might help solve your problem. Okay, let's get back to something else fun. Let's put in a cube. Holding control, look at that. That's another thing. We'll let you do that from the center. Okay, so boom, I'll zero this out for fun, and then let's just make it square. So I'll just even. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna select the middle, do a connect, and I wanna point out symmetry. I use this pretty often, and Maya has it built in up top now. Instead of having to do a modifier, you can click up here and then say either world, topology, or object. In this case, I'm just going to do object X, and it looks like X is from here to there, so I'm going to do, should be Z. There we go. So find the axes that works for you, and now you're in symmetry mode. And so anything you do on one side, including edits, and this is one thing that's really nice, will happen to the other side, and that includes stuff like cuts. So that's a great way to work, because you'll see the other side immediately and what it's doing. So that's pretty awesome. I'll use that really often. You could turn that off if you want to kind of reorient yourself. You got to make sure it's actually across the axes properly, right? So you could always start with 1/2, duplicate it over if you need. But if you're starting from scratch there, it's probably centered as it is. The other way to do this is doing, where is it? Mesh, modify, symmetrize. Mesh, symmetrize, I believe, I don't use this too often. Nope, guess not. So the way I'll typically do it, that you'll see me do it, to be honest, I kind of do a roundabout way, which is D, X, making sure, so holding D, holding X, middle mouse, making sure that my pivot is in the center, and then just doing negative scale like that, right? So I'll duplicate it, negative scale. I kind of did this workflow originally because I was having trouble with Maya's symmetry, and it kept crashing on me and breaking stuff. So I'll do that, I'll freeze the transform so it's no longer negative. Select them both, combine them, mesh, like combine, and now it's one piece, and then select all of it, and then merge the verts. It's a lot, but I'll do that, and then you'll see the verts up here go from 28 down to 24, because 1, 2, 3, 4 extras were merged away. That's how I used to do it. I'll still do that a lot, to be honest, in combination with this thing up here. But I don't think it was symmetrized that I was necessarily looking for there. Mirror. I believe this is it. So you could cut it, combine with the original. So this is the other one, not symmetrize. Sorry about that. That you can use if you want like a quicker way to do it. And I have a button for it right here. We'll try it real quick just because might as well. But I tend to not use those. And that's just a personal preference. I'm sure it's fine. And it's been a couple revisions since I've really dug into it. So let's see, mirror, pop that open. We'll say go along Z, say the direction. So here, I don't know if there's a plus or minus. I think it's minus. So it might be going that way, but let's just try it. Apply. Yeah, so now it's invisible. So we'll change the axis direction to plus. It looked like it was going green though, so I'm just gonna do it in here. Apply, and there we go. So it's still separate there. So you might have to merge it yourself, but let's try the combine with original and then merge border vertices, apply, and there we go. So that's essentially a quicker way of doing what I was doing. And maybe I'll start using this one again because it's a lot of workaround, but I like the other way because I have full control over it. But by all means, if you never have a problem with this one, use this one, save yourself the time. So symmetry, super useful. Now, let's look at a couple other fun tools. These ones I'll use in specific situations. So I'm going to toss in, let's just do a cylinder. And I'm going to add a few height to it. I'm going to freeze the transforms here. And I'm going to show you something I find really useful. But you're going to have to switch over to the animation tab for this because we want deformers and they're in the animation tab. I haven't seen a way to really, oh, did they add it? Oh, they moved it. Okay, so since upgrading I haven't looked around a lot, but I guess it's in the modeling tab now too. Either that or I'm a dumb and didn't see it there for the past 5 years. But we're going to go here and we're going to go lattice. And this is really useful because you could set different points to like warp your model with. So I'm going to leave it on the default, but you can change these how many points you want in every direction. And now to use it, I would right click on the lattice itself and go to lattice point. And now if I grab one and move it, it's kind of soft selecting everything inside of it. And this is a great way to make edits to your model that are kind of like smooth, you know, like smooth edits. So if you're trying to do something that's just like scaling one end of it or tapering it, it's a really nice way to do it. You know, go crazy. But it's very powerful. I recommend it. And to finish off, we could go back to object mode. If we move this, it's bringing everything with it. If we move the object, it's going to be affected only when it's within that lattice. But let's say you want to keep it, right? Because I believe if we, yeah, it's going to stick with it. But if we delete our modeling history, oops, or actually this is deformer history. So this is one of the times that we're actually going to have to do history overall. Wait, why you not do history? Oh, I guess it was because I didn't have the right object selected. So if I select this one and then history, it gets rid of the lattice and now it's baked in. So you might want to keep it or not. But there you go. That's how you kind of keep it after you made your edits. Another cool deformer is bend, and that's in nonlinear and then bend. So I'll click that. And it already has some options on it, but I could turn those down. I click curvature, use our middle mouse trick. We can unbend it, and then changing the low bound and high bound, we could say, you can kind of see the visuals if we go into wireframe mode, how it's affecting it. So this is super, super cool. So you can bend stuff, make pipes and stuff like that really easily. And then the same thing when you're done, you just delete the history on it, and it's baked in. So those are super awesome. I like those a lot. Okay, now we're going to talk about something. This is a great tool for retopo, I guess. For if you don't have another topology program and you want to retopo in Maya, which I like to do every now and then, I'll retopo straight in Maya because the tools are quite good and I like to be able to model alongside of it. So for this demonstration, I have a sphere that I made earlier that's really smooth. And there's a couple things that we're going to talk about all at once. The first is snapping to a live surface. And to use quad draw in like a retopo kind of scenario, you're going to want to be able to snap to a surface. So this could be, you know, a bust of someone, a head, a hand, a weapon, whatever. The first thing you can do is have it selected and click this button up here. It's the magnet with nothing under it. If you click it, you're going to see your object name appear in here, and we can't select this anymore. But everything we move around, all the verts and edges are going to snap to this. So it's good to be aware of if that's on or not. Now, how do we use this? If we go into quad draw mode, which is in Mesh Tools, quad draw, now the tool is selected. If we click, it creates verts. And if we rotate around, you'll notice those verts are on the surface. So, okay, so what can we do with those verts? I'm just creating a bunch of verts. Great. Who cares, right? Who cares? What's it to you? Well, we could turn these into a mesh really quickly. You could also click and drag to move them. But you turn a mesh quickly by holding Shift and then clicking. And you can see a preview where it's going to show up. So now I can just, boom, we already have some faces there. That's rad, right? And we could hold Shift and it relaxes it. It's kind of weird when there's not a lot. We'll get to that. So let's put a couple more, right? So we could just place a bunch of verts here. And we could also hold Control and add some more to add edge loops. And now if we press Shift, right, we see a little more obviously the relax functionality. But we can move the edges, we can move the faces. It's really quite quick. So we also have a way to delete stuff. And it's not obvious at first, but it's Shift Control, and that will let you delete a loop or a polygon. Not really a vert or an edge, but you get the polys, you get the loops. So you can simplify pretty quickly too, right? If I get rid of those and then I'll put one here. You know, I'll get rid of this one and this one. That's nice. So one of the frustrations with this one, I would say, is making triangles, but a workaround that I found is like just putting two down, making it, and then if you drag one vert on top of another, it's going to automatically weld it. And I believe you could change this behavior, but it's pretty desirable behavior, I feel. And there we go. So now we could retopo and have our head / weapon / creature / hamburger, whatever you're making. Delicious. And you notice it is going to fill up our history there too. So we got to be careful every now and then. So, okay, now how can we combine this with stuff we learned already too? Well, I want to cut this up a little more, but I don't want to just create an edge, and I don't want to have to delete this and then remake a thing, and then sometimes, you know, it might add up. It does, however, let you close a edge or a triangle. It shows in purple, but it will let you create triangles. But I want more power, right? More power. More power. So what we can do is by holding Shift, right click, and Control. So sorry, Shift, Control, and right click to bring up our options like we did with the other tools. We're going to see stuff like auto weld, snapping to back faces. We could extend our selection, I believe. We could clear out extra dots. So if we have a bunch of these hanging around, clear dots to just make it nice and clean. But we could also go to the multi-cut tool straight from here without leaving this whole blue mesh extravaganza. And so now we could just cut up specific things however we want, including making stuff like triangles super easily. And then we can go straight back, Shift, Control, back to quad draw. So this is a really nice, fast workflow for doing retopology. And it's right in Maya. You don't have to buy or install anything else. So I really like this. I like this functionality a lot. And I try to retopo in Maya whenever possible. As long as it's not too complex of a mesh, then I might decide to use something like TopoGun or 3D Code or stuff like that. But I really do like what they have here. Okay, so when you're done, you can go back to object mode. We can either hide or turn off our live object, and I'll just get rid of it. And then there's our mesh, and we can use it however we see fit. So I'll clear the history there. Now we got a couple things left. We're almost there. We're almost there. So one tool that saved my butt a bunch, and I'll do it with a cylinder here, because I've had this kind of situation the most. So I have the cylinder here, and it's in a weird angle like this, and it's frozen. But I want this to be flat on the ground again, right? Like with the H. But I don't remember what those numbers were, right? So I can like try to line it up, and it might be close, but I need it exact. Well, what can we do? Well, one thing there that I found is if you make a plane or just have a flat surface of where you want it to lay. So let's create a plane here. There's something called the Snap Together tool. And you could do this on any angle, any plane to plane. But if you go up here to Modify, Snap Together, now it's going to say on the bottom, click on the surface to be moved. And then you got to click on the destination, and it's even going to draw a line. It's going to take this and put it there. And then if you press enter, oh, it says or drag the arrows. Ooh, let's try that. Oh, that doesn't seem to do it. Drag the arrows or press enter. I'm dragging the arrows. So that doesn't seem like it does it. But if we press enter, boom. I kind of wanted to drag those arrows. All right, so now it's flat again. And we see all those, and we can either freeze them out or just keep them. But that's great. And now, same thing with this though. This could be in like a weird, wild direction. We do the same thing. Snap together. Boom. Enter. I think that's pretty handy and worthy of knowing for sure. Okay. We got one thing left. That's right. We're here at the end. Zero these out. Oh no. Well, let's do what we learned again real quick. We make our plane. We grab this. Snap together. Enter. Nice and quick. I'll freeze this out. So another really important thing is being able to instance things. And this is really handy if you have an element like spikes that might be all over your character or creature or weapon, etc. If you're making an environment, you're probably going to have tons of mailboxes, right? There's going to be mailboxes left and right. So you're probably going to need a bunch of them, and you don't want to have to duplicate them every time you make a change. So if you go Edit, Duplicate Special, this is where you find instances in Maya. So we'll go to the option here, and we could see it could be a copy, or it could be an instance, and you could say if you want it parented to the world. It has a a parent, like this might be its parent, a new group. But you also have options for translation, how many copies, and if it has scale. And so in this case, I had a -1 because I was mirroring something and I wanted that other side of the mirror to be an instance. So it would update with my first side. But I'm going to go ahead and just turn it to 1 for both of these to normalize it. And I'll hit duplicate special. So we got another one. Doesn't look like anything's changed here, but now whenever we make edits to one, it does it to the other. So I use this quite often for sure. But sometimes you might want this to be its own thing again and not follow this one, in which case you go edit, or is it create? I believe it's, oh, it's modify, that's right. Modify, convert, and then instance to object. So it's kind of hidden. Modify, convert, instance to object. And now it's its own thing. And if I edit it, this one is left alone. Okay, that's awesome. But you probably saw there was a lot of stuff in that menu. So let's go over that real quick. And then we'll call it a day. So if we go edit, duplicate special again, we have the instance selected, but we could also do something like multiple copies. And we could also do something like maybe it moves 5 units on the X every time. If I hit apply, whoa, now we got 3 copies that were moved along the X. And they're all instances. That's great. So I'll get rid of those. What if we add a rotation too? What if they do 15 degrees every time? So now they're rotating. So this is a way of doing arrays within Maya, and it's kind of handy, that's for sure. So I'm going to get rid of those. Now you know how to do that. You can also, this is like a bonus, when you move, so let's say I do either a copy or an instance, doesn't matter, I'm just going to do a copy and move it over. Doesn't matter what amount. If you instead do duplicate with transform, Shift D, it's going to remember the transform you just made. And as many times as you press Shift D, it's going to use it. And so this is a way to have evenly spaced objects. So I'll use this a lot. For instance, let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. I'll hold J, right, to snap to the rotation. I'll scale it down. Let's put it like right out here. So I'm going to use my other tools from earlier. Let's turn wireframe on. I'll hold D to edit my pivot. Hold V to snap to vert. Go to there. So now I'm going to be rotating around here. So I'm actually just going to freeze just to keep it in there. I don't think it's necessary, but I did it just to make sure that's at 0. And now I can either duplicate special with instances like we just saw, or I can just hit duplicate and then rotate it either with this by typing in a number, by eyeballing it, or whatever. So maybe I want to do, let's do 30 degrees, right? Or like 45 degrees. And now if I hit Shift D, oopsies. So let me, I think I pressed something in between. You have to kind of make sure you're not doing too much. So I'll duplicate. Let's do 45 degrees. I'm holding J down to keep the snap, and then Shift D. And now I have it around my center point. So if I'm putting like spikes around a collar or something, right? Or there's like an orb and I want to put, you know, things jutting out from it. That's a really handy way to accomplish that really quickly without much effort. So I know that was a lot. Thanks for sticking with me. I hope this enlightened you with some new tools, or at least, you know, gave you more confidence in the way you're already working. There was a lot there. Feel free to go back, rewatch, however many times you need. I encourage you to play with the tools, especially if you're not familiar with them. Just use them in a bunch of different scenarios, right? Try to work them into whatever you're making today, or just do what I did, pop open a cylinder or a sphere and just mess with them so you get a feel of them, so they're more predictable to you, so that when you are modeling, your brain will remember oh, here's another tool available to me. I don't have to like manually move all those verts and try to align them, visually. I can use snaps, or I can use merge or whatever other tool that can help you get your model to where you want it to be. So yeah, I hope that helped a lot. You'll see me use all this stuff constantly in the tutorials when I'm in the modeling stage. And so I hope this really helped.